Hey everybody, Questwise here, and today, as promised, we're going to be talking about magic and low fantasy gaming. If you've watched the previous couple of videos, you'll know that I love this game. There's something really um, attractive to me about this game, and I think that it's because it sort of harkens back to the way that I like fantasy to be. I like it to be a little bit grittier. I like it to be a little bit more grounded. I like it to be more feral, I guess, in a sense. And I see a lot of space in this game that allows a lot of really cool, distinct play styles. And that's something I really want to explore in the future. I want to talk about different ways that you can play this game outside of maybe just the typical sort of medieval level era fantasy. Um, I want to start working on some ideas for myself and for my local group, maybe some online groups and stuff as well too. But if you know anything about me, I love magic and I love unique ways that magic works. Now, the way low fantasy gaming does this is um, it's interesting because it takes this unique approach at something that's already sort of built, and that's what really fascinates me about the magic in low fantasy gaming. Is it seems very, very familiar if you've played any other D20 type games, any other kind of like popular fantasy type games, but takes it and twists it to give it a unique qualities to it as well too. And that's something I wasn't sure that was even possible. To be honest, I've often looked at the Vancian style of magic and thought to myself, how can I make this better, or how can I change this in a way to make it unique? And for a long time I thought that I would have to rewrite the entire magic system. What Pickpocket Press has done with this is taken those very familiar tropes, those very familiar styles of magic, and has added some very unique things to it as well too. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So the most easy way to access magical spells in low fantasy gaming is through the class the magic user. And we'll also talk a little bit today about the cultist as well too. Um, and I've mentioned the cultist before when we talked about classes, and how that was one of my favorites because it has this broad appeal of blessings and these kinds of things. But those things can go wrong too, and we'll talk about those in a minute. First, we're going to talk about arcane magic and magic users using those spells. Now, it's pretty typical that you start off with a certain number of spells that you can use per day, and that you know a certain number of spells. If a magic user finds a scroll or a spell book during his journeys, he can also add an extra spell when they advance a level, in that they have access to more spells, but again, it's still a certain number per day. That's pretty standard. Where it gets really interesting is that every time you cast a spell as a magic user, you're going to make a dark and dangerous roll. So you're going to roll a d20, all right? And on a roll of a 1 for the first time, you'll roll on this chart that has these various effects. If you don't roll, if nothing happens, you don't roll a 1 on the first time, that number goes up incrementally until something does happen. Magic was not meant for mortals. Sorcery was not meant to be sort of shaped and used by mortal flesh. And there's a cool way that every time you do it, even if you're successful at it, that danger level increases every single time. And I love that about this game. So some of the effects that can happen when you're doing this type of dark and dangerous roll can be very surface effects kind of thing. Your skin is covered in some kind of a slime. Your heartbeat, you don't appear to have a heartbeat. Those kinds of things can happen, all the way up to crazy things like summoning evil, or casting a random spell. Right, you might summon a demon, or it might just, the spell that you're intending to cast becomes a completely different spell, and the target could be completely different. So there's lots of crazy dangerous things that can happen. One of those things you don't want to happen is you casting a spell and a demon appears and starts to attack you and your party, right? That's these horrible things. But again, it's the chance that you take for this amount of power. And that's another cool thing about low fantasy gaming, is that it makes Magic feel very forbidden, yet very, very enticing, because it's very powerful. On the other side of that kind of stuff, with the divine blessings, there's also the same kind of idea. You're still going to roll, but you're not going to roll for a dark and dangerous thing. You're going to roll for a rebuke. So what happens is that you might anger the gods, in that you're trying to use a spell that's maybe forbidden to you, or you're using a blessing in the wrong way. You can use favor to mitigate those kinds of things, but eventually you'll run out of favor, and you're going to just try to force the gods to give you the effect that you want, and that could anger them, and that can also be very, very bad. There is a D100 table of rebukes, the things bad that can happen, and it can be, again, it's very surface level. It could be that your holy symbol just shatters, or it could be the fact that I think it's called I Summon Thee, where you just disappear from existence, and a few minutes later you return to where you were at with no idea of what happened to you. And it gives the game master lots of great gravy to pour all over you of what may have happened to you while you were gone from existence for a bit of time. Now, the great thing about that is there are also things called rites of atonement. There are ways for you to get back into good graces with your deity. Or your whatever it is that you worship, kind of thing. So there's those ideas that you can sort of gain favor back of the gods as well too. There are 6 levels of arcane spells. We already talked about the blessings and stuff when we talked about classes. Those are kind of self-contained spells, spell-like effects that the cultists have, but the magic users have 6 levels of spells. And what I really love about this game as well too is that the spells are very unique. Some of them are pretty normal. Some of them are pretty, things you would expect from a game, but from a fantasy game. But there's also some very cool, unique effects in there as well too. And one of the other cool things about Pickpocket Press has done about this as well too, is they've given the spells some really cool names, some very evocative type of nomenclature, if you will, to make the spells feel very forbidden and very enticing. Things like Feywalker's Drifting, Shadows and Dust, One with the Deep, and my all-time favorite, Beseeching the Ancient Ones. So the magic in this game is really, really cool, and I can see some really awesome ways to play this game in different styles and stuff as well too. And I would have to say, currently right now, it's one of my favorite magic systems out there. It is really, really that evocative. It's really that enticing and cool. And there's nothing cooler than being like, I'm going to cast the spell Shadows and Dust, right? It just gives that game that cool, grittier, deep kind of feel that I've been looking for in a role-playing game for a long time. I was going to make this the last of the series, but I think I want to go further. I think I want to take this on a little bit more as well. So I think maybe next week we'll touch on something else. I haven't really figured out what yet. Maybe we'll talk about adventure design. There's also some rules for madness in here, which I'd love to talk about as well a little bit too, because that's one of my favorite things in the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, is the idea of madness and insanity. And it touches on this in the core rulebook about this as well too. So maybe next week we'll touch on that. But I'd like to take this further and make this just kind of ongoing thing. If you guys like this series, let me know in the comments below. Please hit a like, share this video, share this series of videos that I'm doing on low fantasy gaming, and give me some suggestions on what you'd like to see, what you'd like me to talk about within the scope of low fantasy gaming and stuff as well too. At some point, I'd like to maybe even interview the author, and if I can. Technology is not my strong suit, so at some point I'll figure out a way for maybe to us to set up an interview, which is a little bit tough since I live in the United States and the author lives in Australia, but I'm sure we can probably work something out. So until next time, I'm Questwise and I am out.